The scariest monsters are the ones that lurk within our souls. As Arisen, we are given power not only to defy our fate, but to completely reshape the world around us. Overcoming armies, besting dragons, and standing against gods are all very common occurrences. Even without the Seneschal's powers, it is frightening what an Arisen is capable of. Nowhere is this more evident than on the dimensional anomaly known as Bitter Black Island, at the heart of which sits the monster known as Daimon, born from the heart of an Arisen in despair. Whatever the true origin of the island, whether an externally created prison or self-made trap, the influence of Daimon on his domain is irrefutable. And yet, at his core, Daimon is still an Arisen. The basic nature of the Arisen is still within him, and it shows. Daimon's story begins with a young boy named Asha. In a distant land, unimaginably far in the past, in a world perhaps completely separate from our own, this child lived with his family in a small and cramped seaside village. One day, Ash's village was attacked by a mighty great dragon. It razed his home, destroyed his people, and left him for dead. By chance, or perhaps even design, that Arisen, a woman named Greta, discovered Asha in the ruins of his home. She pulled him to his feet, she fed and clothed him, and in the end she took him on her travels. Asha looked to this woman as his new mother, but in time he felt stirrings of romantic love as well, and so he was heartbroken when Greta forbid him from joining her for the fight against her dragon. She and her pawn, Olra, left Asha behind, and the Arisen known as Greta was never seen again. Asha wandered on his own for a great deal of time before he found Olra. She was now a human, bestowed by Greta's spirit and given her likeness. Asha nursed her to health, and the two began a romantic relationship. But the ending was not happily ever after. Some years later, Asha is confronted by a great dragon himself. He is made Arisen, and he pursues it. On facing the mighty beast, he learns an unsettling truth. The great dragon he stands against is, in fact, his former mentor and savior Greta. To compound his deeper despair, he is given the dragon's bargain, the price to pay being the life of Olra. In a fit of despair, Asha curses the world, himself, and everything. Greta is forced to accept that as his wish, and Olra is slain. And that is the sum of our knowledge about Asha and his history before becoming Daimon. And yet there is so much missing in terms of context for the Arisen story. Foremost missing is Ash's main pawn. Many things on Bitter Black Island allude to this mysterious pawn, and his influence holds perhaps stronger even than his own master. The first bit of evidence is how thoroughly it appears his existence is scrubbed away. Some have theorized that Asha adopted Olra as his main pawn and traveled only with her. But this just isn't possible. Olra was human the moment Greta was slain. She could not be a pawn. So what can we look for with regards to this hidden myrmidon? Let's begin with some of the legendary treasures that are to be found. Most of the higher level equipment follows some manner of thematic naming, and one set in particular stands apart from the rest. The Sin Armor set, in which every piece has a different name. Notably, they are red vocationed equipment, so the next step in the chain is to look at the relevant weaponry. The most likely answer to this riddle is the longsword known as Bitter End, a longsword lined with ominous patterns that reflect the deep enmity within. It senses the negativity of its wielder and sharpens its edge to match. We will return to that in a moment. Just as a matter of elimination, the sword Devil's Bane cannot be relevant to the mystery, as its description states its former owner has died. The Verge of Madness mace is exempt for the same reason. Fighter and Mystic Knight are out of the equation. The wearer of the Sin Armor was a warrior. What does this have to do with Ash's main pawn? Well, everything. The mystery continues on the notice boards of Bitter Black Island, as we may come across any of the 5 seemingly unrelated quests. Nothing in their titles suggests any connection beyond theme words, unlike every other related notice board quest which comes in parts. And yet they are all connected, all posted by the same person, all have the same phrasing in their descriptions. I call upon you, wanderer of the abyss. I call upon you, lost and withless human. Of the 5, only the first and last stand out. Echoes from the Beyond calls us to examine all of the recollections of former Arisen to record on the Monument of Remembrance. This is important for telling us a great deal about the history of those on the island, even if some details are fuzzy or just not there. Of exceptional note is that every memory he directs us to belongs to exactly one Arisen out of the countless number that have been through the island's depths. Those are Arthacus, better known as Death. The one writing the quests is familiar with Arthacus, and they want us to know about him. They want us to see into his heart, perhaps because they too did exactly that and pushed him towards his change. Then we arrive at the heart of darkness. This is where we discover the one who wrote the other 4 quests. In full it reads, "I call upon you, wanderer of the abyss. I call upon you, lost and witless human. You may topple the labyrinth's lord, but that will not reveal the way to the light. You must see through the lies and open the path of blood that leads to me." This chain of quests was written by Daimon II. All along there were 2 Daimons, the one we fought at first and the second one hiding behind the scenes. This raises a lot of questions by itself, the biggest one being why there are 2 Daimons if there is only one Asha. And yet they're all easily answered with one simple explanation. Daimon II is the former main pawn of Asha. We can dig deeper into this line of thinking too. Consider the difference in strength. Daimon II is far stronger than Daimon, yet he stays in the background. Why? Because he's still bound to obey his Arisen. And yet he is corrupted as any other pawn. He resents his servitude and actively helps you gain the strength you need to overcome Daimon. His will becomes manifest, and why? Because Daimon was slain. And his treachery against his master did not begin on Bittleblack Island. Even as a normal pawn, he grew a resentment in his heart that spiraled out of control. Perhaps it was jealousy, or anger, or hatred. But it all started with Ash's tormented heart influencing his main pawn, as all Arisen influenced their own. And this treachery is reflected in the Sinner armor set and the Bitter End longsword. Ash's main pawn was a warrior. This explains as well how it became a Daimon. A main pawn will, in canon, eventually assume the form of their master. As Asha twisted into a Daimon, so too did his pawn. In the end, what separated them was Ash's human grounding that his pawn lacked. Where Asha never fully gave in to Daimon, his pawn jumped in head first and ascended into awakened Daimon, or Daimon II. This creature is an unusual one as well. Despite being a pawn, it is almost closer to being an Arisen. It can touch upon the rift, use skills outside of normal pawn vocations, and seems on its way to becoming more bastardized form of Great or Ur-Dragon. This opens up a new line of questions as to how and why, but the answer lies all throughout Bittleblack Island. Dead Arisen. Everywhere you go on the isle, you'll find half-eaten corpses and mountains of picked clean bones from hundreds and thousands of corpses, if not millions. These extend all the way into the final chamber. The Daimons have not just been killing Arisen, they have been consuming them. And finally, we come to the end of the puzzle. Daimon II's defeat. Once bested, a strange figure seems to enter the rift like a dying pawn, lending further evidence to the notion that Daimon II is exactly that. And yet he returns. He always returns. The final question, how? Because he is corrupted. Like every other non-party pawn on Bittleblack Island, he is the most corrupt of them all. He can never truly enter the rift, instead being destined to be reborn over and over, until the turning of the Eternal Ring destroys Bittleblack Island and everything begins anew. Oftentimes, the worst monsters aren't the ones in the world or in our heads, they are those within our own hearts and the hearts of those closest to us.